Christ Jesus our Lord.
Amen.
Bene. One more.
Get yourself a girl. Will be your son soon enough.
Signore? Step forward.
Another day, another Slop movie game to review on the channel, and today on the chopping block is none other than Mafia the Old Country.
I need to get over there!
And like I mentioned earlier, this is definitely what I would consider to be a movie game. If you are familiar with these Sony walk and talk, dialogue, and cutscene simulators with a little bit of gameplay sprinkled in here and there, that is definitely what you're going to be getting from Mafia the Old Country. This game definitely feels like one of those titles you could very easily just watch on YouTube instead of actually playing yourself. Now granted, the movie that is here, to its credit, is actually pretty good in my personal opinion. I did enjoy the story and cinematic elements of this game, but again, you could very easily get that same experience just by watching it on YouTube, because really the gameplay is nothing to write home about whatsoever. Now, TLDR, for those who don't want to watch this entire review, should you buy Mafia the Old Country? I would say there's only two scenarios in which you should buy Mafia the Old Country. If you are a massive fan of the Mafia franchise, you probably already bought this anyway, so there you go, not really relevant. But the second group of people is those that can get this game on a deep discount, because I do feel like for 50 bucks you're not really getting your money's worth, especially when you can really experience the bulk of this particular game just by watching a playthrough of your favorite content creator or just turning on a no commentary walkthrough of the game. You're not really missing out too much by not playing it yourself. So let's go ahead and talk about the little gameplay that is actually in Mafia the Old Country. Now, the gameplay starts off as a typical walking simulator. There's not really much in terms of combat or anything like that. You find yourself in a mine from which you have to escape, and for the first hour or so of the game, the only thing you're really going to be doing is walking in a straight line, listening to dialogue, and then there is a light stealth sequence in the game that really is nothing to write home about. Like, if you think Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft stealth is a joke, this game takes that to an entirely different level about how bad enemy NPC is during stealth segments. And primarily, this is the only gameplay you're going to be getting out of this game for the first 4 hours. You don't even get a gun until about 4 hours into the game, and even then, those combat sections are very, very short-lived at first. You'll maybe get to shoot 5 or 10 guys before you go to another hour or two of walking and talking, driving a car, riding a horse, or watching cutscenes. So if you're looking for a fast-paced, gameplay-focused experience, that is definitely not what you're getting out of Mafia the Old Country. Now, I mentioned cars and horses. The horses are actually pretty fun to ride. I did enjoy the mechanics related to that. The cars, in typical Mafia fashion, however, are absolutely horrid to control. This game also has a car racing sequence like the first game did, and while it's not as bad as that, the controls definitely do not help in making it a fun and memorable experience for any of the right reasons. So just know that going in, the controls have not really improved all that much from the 360 entries of this franchise, which is actually kind of crazy to think about considering that was 2 console generations ago. But outside of one horse race and one car race, there's really not that much reliance on the vehicles, thankfully. You will be required from time to time to ride a horse or drive a car from one mission objective to the other, which luckily isn't too far in any particular circumstance within the game, but there are some sequences that you're actually able to skip. Like if you're driving to a mission objective that's far away, there is a prompt in the game to actually skip that ride, which I thought was really nice, you know, very self-aware. This game really reminds me a lot of LA Noire in its pacing and its controls and its structure. Like, it's one of those games where it's like a pseudo open world, but more so linear driven experience. Like, you can kind of explore if you want to, but there's not really any incentive to do so. Just kind of like LA Noire. The only thing it's missing, obviously, is the really cool interrogation sequences that LA Noire Noir has. So if you're trying to get an idea of like the pacing and overall, I guess, story to gameplay levels, that's probably the best comparison I can think of. Like LA Noire, it's very back heavy when it comes to the combat encounters. So I would say that's the best comparison I can think of. This game is obviously much shorter than LA Noire was because it's missing all the interrogation sequences and finding clues and everything like that, but I would say the pacing's pretty much spot on compared to that if you're looking for a good reference point. I already kind of mentioned the stealth a little bit. It is like Ubisoft stealth light. The enemy NPCs are genuinely retarded. They have no idea that you're even there. You can walk right in front of them at times and they don't even notice. You can, choke somebody out right behind them. No care in the world. Like, this is Ubisoft stealth put on baby mode, if you ask me, which honestly, I don't really care. I'm not looking for a hardcore stealth experience from a Mafia game, and considering that this game has a lot of stealth encounters, it is actually a pretty viable option to just go in and choke everybody out on your way into a certain building. Now, you can go in guns blazing in about 99% of the encounters, which is actually nice, so you have a choice between doing stealth or not doing stealth, which personally I am always a fan of. I don't like forced stealth sequences, but yeah, just like the stealth gameplay, the actual gun combat is not anything to write home about. It has the same kind of like snap lock-on feature that a Rockstar game would have, only you have this bloom effect that the longer you aim down sight, the smaller the reticle goes, and it makes your shots more precise. So it does have a little bit of, I guess, uniqueness, but it feels very similar to a Rockstar game in its actual shooting mechanics, which I don't really think is a good thing. For all of Rockstar games accolades, I don't really think their third-person shooting mechanics deserve any of them because they're very, very bare bones basic and really have not changed that much since the PlayStation 2 generation in any significant way whatsoever. So again, stealth, gunplay, your main combat, I guess, abilities are not really anything exciting and feel very dull, and a lot of times the combat sequences feel like they exist just to pad out the time in between various cutscenes. Again, the story is the main focus of this game in typical movie game fashion, and the gameplay sequences are the actual filler, which, yeah, I'm not really too big a fan of that. Luckily, like I mentioned earlier, the movie itself is pretty good, but again, you don't need to play the game to actually experience that. So as a game, it's not good, but as a movie, I guess it is. So the only other gameplay element really to note is the fact that you are able to engage in these knife fights, which feel like Hellblade combat with a little bit more detail, I would say. So if you ever played the Hellblade games, that's basically what the knife fights boil down to. You have a parry mechanic, you have a break guard mechanic, you have a heavy and light attack, and all the boss fights in this game are done through this mechanic. And honestly, they're not anything crazy. I don't think they're super enjoyable for the most part, but they're not annoying. Like, they're not difficult or, super autistic with the timing or anything like that. So I didn't mind these particular sequences, but after like the 10th time you do it, it's like, okay, what are we doing here, man? Like, can we spice it up a little bit? Can there be like a little bit of, variety in here just to make it feel like I'm not doing the same thing over and over and over again? Because every single enemy basically has the exact same attack pattern. It's super easy to read the moves, but again, the gameplay obviously not the focus here. So that aspect I don't really think is worth mentioning too much on because it's pretty self-explanatory. You have to try to lose one of these knife fights. Like, they're really brain dead easy, and overall, if you're familiar with the Hellblade combat system, it feels very, very similar to that in those particular instances, which I'm guessing, they thought, well, we won't do fist fights again, we'll just replace it with knife fights, which I guess is kind of cool for all things considered. Now, you can get various different weapons and knives throughout the game, but they don't really do anything, man. Like, the only weapon that has any sort of variability in what it does effect-wise is the knife. Like, you can buy knives with higher durability to open select chests within the environment, or pick locks, or assassinate enemies instantly, but the chokeout mechanic is so instantaneous that you'll never really need to use your knife to kill enemies, so the whole durability mechanic is basically irrelevant. The guns you get in the game are the exact same from start to finish. You can buy individual guns to start missions with, but you can find all of those guns scattered throughout the mission within the first minute or two, so there's not really any reason to spend money on that. There is a rosary bead upgrade system, which I thought was kind of cool aesthetically, but again, it doesn't really do much because the combat's so brain dead easy. You're gonna forget about the combat upgrades that it gives you anyway, and also the combat's so sparse in the first like 2/3 of the game that you're not even gonna realize that you need that shit anyway. So overall, the combat and gameplay of this game feels about as deep as a puddle. It's there, it's something to, I guess, space out the cutscenes and the story progression, but it is nothing to write home about. And that's why I think this game fails from a gameplay perspective. You really don't gain anything from actually playing this particular game. It's almost better watched, in my personal opinion, because of how bland and boring the gameplay experience truly is. So let's go ahead and talk about the story. Now, I'm not going to be getting into point-by-point spoilers surrounding Mafia the Old Country because, again, this is the main selling point and the main reason why people are going to be interested in this particular game. But I will say, personally, I really did like the story in this game. I thought it was engaging. I was interested in the characters. They nail the feeling of the time period, bro. Like the atmosphere, the immersion, the music. The dialogue, everything feels right, man. There is a very authentic and soulful feel when you're walking around the world of this game, which for a walking simulator movie game is very, very important, which luckily they absolutely nailed. I genuinely had a great time experiencing the story, the world, and just taking in the scenery as I played through this particular game, which is not something you can really say too much these days, which I think really contributed to my overall enjoyment of this game dramatically, because overall I did have a good time, all things considered. Even though the gameplay is definitely lacking and it's objectively a bad video game because of it, as a walking simulator movie, I actually did really enjoy it. It has that old 1980s through early 2000s Mafia feel. Like, it imitates the music from a lot of the popular movies, like The Godfather, for example. It really has that feel, bro. It pulls you in. You feel like you're in early 1900s Italy. It's beautiful. Bro, I can't say it enough. I really do think they nailed the immersion factor of this game. I just really wish the gameplay itself was actually more, you know, thought out and well implemented into the game, because this could have really been something special, bro. They did a fantastic job replicating that time period and making it a believable historical environment, which I know will bring up the question, is there any woke or modern bullshit in the game? And the answer is no, bro, with the very few exceptions. There are slight digs here and there against Mussolini and the right-wing factions rising up in Italy at that particular time, as well as, you know, your typical corrupt Catholic Church that breaks the bounds of the confessional and reveals secrets to the mafia. You know, outside of that, there's really not anything woke that I can mention. I mean, slight story spoiler here, but the ultimate big bad of this game is literally someone who is pro-abortion, and that's why he becomes a villain in the storyline, is because he wants someone to get an abortion. So I don't know, maybe this is like the ultimate anti-woke period piece walking simulator that we've gotten in the past 15 years in the gaming industry. It might just be. So if you're worried about this game not accurately representing the time period or not being immersive because there's black and brown people everywhere in 1900s Italy, that is not the case whatsoever. I mean, unless you count the Italians themselves. But for those of you who are worried that it fits iDubbbz's definition of what an Italian is...
Look at this, guys. This is Rome. This is Europe. Does this look like Europe to you?
Yes, it looks like Europe to me. What the fuck else are we supposed to gather from this video?
Luckily, that is not the case in this particular game, and the only non-white Italian in this game is a white American guy. So overall, it is 100% immersive. You will feel like you are transported back in time to that particular time period, and it's the part that I enjoyed the most, was just taking in the atmosphere and immersing myself in a better period of time before the Federal Reserve, before mass immigration, and before post-World War II society completely destroyed Western civilization.
I'm not even Italian and it makes me sad. Well, don't let your racism affect you too much. For all you know, the Italians are loving it.
But overall, I think the story is actually very well done. It's very cliche. It has all the typical story tropes you would imagine from this particular genre of movie, again, from like the 1970s onwards when it comes to mafia or mob movies. And overall, I think it's really enjoyable. I genuinely had a great time going through the story of this game. Again, I wish the gameplay was a little bit more memorable and could match the excellent execution of the story itself, but that unfortunately is not the case. But what they were actually going for, which was telling a good story, is done very, very well here, which is why I don't want to spoil it and go into too many details. But to make it very, very brief, here's a quick little synopsis. Essentially, you are a worker in a mine. Your name is Enzo. You escape from said mine. You encounter a mafia don who takes you in. You become a worker for him, and you work your way up through the family, doing different tasks and missions along the way, and meeting a bunch of interesting people and interacting with them in very interesting ways. I'm not going to say too much. Again, I think this is a story actually worth experiencing, so I do not want to spoil it for anyone who is potentially interested. But if there is one shining point in this particular game, it is the overall story, the atmosphere, and the immersion factor, which I think were all really, really well done. Now, while playing Mafia the Old Country, I did encounter some issues with the game. Nothing that I would consider to be like over-the-top game breaking or just, you know, making the game completely unplayable, but over the course of my 10-hour playthrough, I did have 2 hard crashes while playing the game, which it's an Unreal Engine 5 title, so par for the course, not really anything new there. And on top of that, there was one instance where I was riding in the back of a truck, and the truck flipped over during a scripted sequence that I was not actually driving during, so I was basically stuck and had to restart that entire sequence, which really wasn't too bad.
Want to get there comfortable or alive? Empty, reloading.
But aside from that, the game ran fine for the most part. I did have the occasional frame drop, especially entering and exiting cutscenes, but during the actual gameplay sequences, the game ran buttery smooth at 60 FPS locked at 4K for me. I am playing on a 5090 and a 9800 XD, so take that for what you will. I should be getting that type of performance, but overall, the game ran and looked fine for me. I think visually, the game looks really good. I think this is one of the better looking games I've played in quite some time. I know people are autistically obsessing over stupid shit like wood cutting animations. Which, don't even get me started on that bullshit, man. That is like the very thing that is killing gaming. People's obsession over parts of a game that don't fucking matter, that make development time take way too fucking long nowadays. So, in the past, you were lucky to even have an animation for it whatsoever, and now people are bitching about it not being hyper detailed. So, that's an entirely different rant altogether that I could go off for probably 10 to 20 minutes on, because that is literally what is destroying the modern video game industry, is this obsession with hyper-realism in every single aspect, which is what's causing these ballooning budgets and massive development times that, when you pair it with incompetent developers that are hired for all the wrong reasons, and the actual talented people getting pushed out of the industry through bullshit Me Too claims. But again, another topic entirely. I'm not going to dwell on that too much. But overall, my experience playing the game was pretty solid. Didn't have any major issues outside of a few. And overall, I would say that the game did launch in a pretty good state, technically speaking, at least in my my particular experience. So overall, I think I kind of summed it up at the beginning. This is not really a great game by any stretch of the imagination. As a game, I think it fails, personally. I don't think this is a good game. But as a movie slash, you know, walkthrough video experience, it's actually really good. I think the story is fantastic. That is what you're playing this for, and that's why I really have a hard time recommending this game at $50 unless you're just a super hardcore Mafia fan, or $50 is just like whatever money to you. Like personally, I don't really care about spending $50 on something I enjoy for 10 hours. So again, it just really depends on where you are financially in that particular aspect. But yeah, personally, I would say that this is not a good video game. It's a movie game. It's barely even qualifying as a video game for about 70 to 80% of its runtime, which I think is a problem. It's something I really despise about the modern video game industry. I just think, like, imagine if this game had this amazing story and an equally amazing gameplay experience paired with it. I think it would really be something special, but it's not, because again, they focus too much on making it a movie game instead of actually, you know, fleshing out the gameplay experience, which is a very, very common trend in today's modern AAA and now AA video game market. It feels like a Hellblade or LA Noire type game where gameplay takes the back seat, but in the case of LA Noire, at least you had the cool interrogation sequences and clue examining sequences and everything like that. In this particular instance, there is none of that. It is just cutscene, dialogue, walking sequence, talk to this person, drive in your car, get on your horse, and maybe you'll get to kill 10 to 15 people in that particular hour with some really unmemorable stealth or third-person shooting game. And that is why I really, really do think Mafia the Old Country fails as a video game. It is more movie game slop, unfortunately. Now, the fortunate part is the movie is actually good that's here. Unlike Sony's movie games, where the gameplay is genuinely boring and forgettable, and the story is equally bad, if not worse, this game actually does have a good underlying story, which makes it at least somewhat redeemable in the end. This is not a Spider-Mid 2 situation or a God of Snore Ragnarok instance where you just literally hate the story and the gameplay equally, and both are boring and you just want the game to be over with. I did genuinely enjoy my time spent with the game because the story was that good, but on the other hand, I don't recommend going out and spending $50 on this particular game. So I'm gonna have to rate this game a 5 out of 10, bro, because for as much as I love the story, I cannot give it a higher ranking because of just how piss poor the gameplay is. So it definitely fails on all those fronts, unfortunately, but overall, I do think it is worth experiencing at some point if you can get this on sale for like maybe 20 or 30 bucks, but personally, I don't think I'd pay much over that if it were my money looking back on it now. Or you could just watch a YouTube playthrough of it and probably get the exact same experience, which again is what I think is the biggest indicator that this is not a good video game by video game standards. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this review here today. Let me know your thoughts on this particular game in the comments section below. Always interested to hear your thoughts on whatever game it is we're talking about today. Also, if you guys could, make sure to hit that like button. It does help out my irrelevant ass channel a bunch, and I always do really appreciate it. So with that shit said, guys, appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day to check out this video and for all the recent support as well on the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.